Most growers who buy fertilizer for their mango trees make the same mistake. Not the wrong product exactly, the wrong mental model for what the product is supposed to do, and by the time they figure that out, they've already spent 2 or 3 seasons buying inputs that were never going to give them what they wanted, not because the product failed, but because they didn't understand what they were actually buying when they stood in that aisle. I want to show you what I mean, because once you see the distinction I'm about to walk you through, you will never look at a bag of mango fertilizer the same way again. Before we get into it, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. We put out practical growing information every week, the kind that holds up when you actually try it. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Let me show you what I'm talking about with a real example. A market gardener I know who ran a small commercial mango operation for over 2 decades, the kind of operation where input costs came directly out of what you ate that season, told me something early on that took me years to fully understand. He said the most expensive fertilizer mistake he ever made wasn't buying something bad. It was buying something that did exactly what the label said and still didn't give him what he needed. He'd bought nitrogen when his trees needed a stress signal. He'd bought a growth booster during dormancy. He'd bought slow release when his trees were in active fruit set and needed something available immediately. The product worked. The timing and the function were wrong. That gap between what a product does and what your tree actually needs at a specific moment is where most mango fertilizer money disappears. Here's what's actually happening when a mango tree stalls. The tree is not necessarily hungry in the way most people assume. Every mango tree is managing low-level stress constantly. Temperature shifts, wind, the energy cost of pushing new growth, the adjustment period after transplant. The tree has a built-in response to that stress, a signaling system that redirects energy toward defense when conditions get difficult. When that stress response runs too hot for too long, the tree has proportionally less energy available for growth, not because nutrients are absent, but because the energy allocation has shifted. The tree is spending what it has on staying stable rather than growing. Standard NPK fertilizers, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, address a completely different problem. They supply the raw materials the tree uses to build tissue. Nitrogen goes toward leaf and stem production. Phosphorus supports root development and flower formation. Potassium plays into fruit quality and water regulation. These are foundational. Without them, no tree produces well, but they do not touch the stress signaling side of the equation. That is where something like salicylic acid comes in, and that distinction is the fertilizer buying insight most growers never get. Salicylic acid is a compound plants produce on their own when they're under stress. Insect attack, drought, disease pressure, nutrient shortfall. The plant generates salicylic acid internally as part of its defense communication. It signals stress through the plant's tissue and triggers protective responses. The USDA found that salicylic acid produced a measurable immune response in plants, helping them prepare for microbial and insect attack. Mango trees have this system. All plants do. Aspirin, plain uncoated aspirin, contains acetylsalicylic acid, which converts inside the plant to salicylic acid. A diluted aspirin solution applied to a mango tree reinforces the tree's own signaling. It can help the tree process everyday stress more efficiently, which frees up energy that would otherwise stay locked in defense mode. Research on mango trees treated with salicylic acid showed measurable increases in chlorophyll content, fruit productivity, and fruit quality, particularly under stress conditions like salinity and heat. The market gardener I mentioned didn't know any of that by name. What he knew was that trees coming out of transplant, shock, or dealing with a rough, dry stretch responded differently when he added a small, cheap input alongside his standard fertilization program. He learned it by watching trees, not by reading studies. The research came later and confirmed what he'd already figured out from 2 decades of watching what happened when he changed one thing at a time. That is the order that matters. The grower learned it first. The mechanism explains why it worked. Now let me walk you through the practical buying decisions this changes, step by step, so you can apply this the next time you're standing in front of a fertilizer display. Step 1. Separate what you're buying into 2 categories. Before you buy anything, ask whether the input you're looking at addresses nutrition or stress signaling. NPK fertilizers, organic meals, slow-release granules, these are nutritional. They supply what the tree builds with. Salicylic acid, whether from aspirin or commercial formulations, addresses stress signaling. It doesn't feed the tree. It helps the tree use what it already has more efficiently. Most growers treat their entire fertilizer budget as a nutrition budget. The ones who see results fastest have a small allocation for stress support that sits separately. Step 2. Match the input to what the tree is actually doing right now. A mango tree in active flush, pushing new leaves, needs nitrogen available relatively quickly. A slow-release granule applied at the wrong point in the growth cycle may not break down fast enough to be useful during that window. A tree that just got transplanted has a completely different problem. It's not nutrient deficient in most cases. It's in stress recovery mode. Adding heavy NPK to a transplant-stressed tree can make things worse, pushing the tree to manage more than it can handle at once. The market gardener learned this the hard way when he transplanted a batch of young trees, fed them aggressively because he wanted them to establish fast, and watched half of them stall for an entire season while the unfed trees caught up and passed them. Transplant shock responds to stress support. It does not respond to more nitrogen. Step 3. Understand the cost math across a full season, not just per bag. Commercial mango operations in Miami-Dade were spending over $276 per acre on fertilizer alone as part of their operating costs. That number sounds manageable until you calculate how much of it was spent on products applied at the wrong time, in the wrong concentration, or addressing the wrong problem. A plain aspirin regimen, 1 tablet per gallon, every 2 to 3 weeks during the active growing season, costs roughly $3 to $5 for the entire season. A comparable commercial mango fertilizer program runs $20 to $40 per tree annually, depending on tree size and product. The aspirin is not replacing the fertilizer program. It is a separate line item that costs almost nothing and addresses the part of tree health that the fertilizer program does not touch. When you separate the two functions in your budget, you stop trying to solve stress problems with nitrogen and you stop spending fertilizer money on problems it was never designed to fix. Step 4. Read the tablet label before you buy, not after. Plain, uncoated aspirin is what dissolves cleanly in water and delivers salicylic acid to the plant without additives. Coated tablets, buffered formulations, combination products. These contain binders, fillers, and other compounds that were designed for human digestion, not for soil or foliar application. Those additives can interfere with how the treatment works or accumulate in the soil over repeated applications. The cheapest store brand plain aspirin performs identically to name brand versions. What matters is the formulation, not the brand. Step 5. Don't apply more because you want faster results. This is where growers who understand the basic concept still get it wrong. Research on salicylic acid in plants is consistent on one point. Benefits are dose-sensitive and conditional. Small concentrations applied at appropriate intervals can stimulate defense response and improve stress tolerance. Higher concentrations can stress the plant rather than support it. 1 tablet per gallon is the correct dilution. Applying twice that concentration does not double the benefit. It pushes the tree's signaling system past the range where it processes the input usefully. The same principle applies to frequency, once every 2 to 3 weeks during active growth. Daily application keeps the tree in a constant low-level stress state, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. Step 6. Test on a small section before treating the whole tree. Every mango variety responds slightly differently. Before treating an entire tree, water one small area near the base or mist a handful of leaves and wait a week. If the tree shows no adverse reaction, no unexpected leaf drop, no sudden wilting, no visible stress, proceed with the full application. If you skip this step and the tree reacts poorly, you treated the whole plant before you had any information about how it responds. The test costs 1 week. Skipping it can cost a season. Step 7. Keep the foundational nutrition program running alongside it. Trees that received only aspirin supplementation without baseline NPK showed no improvement in yield. The stress signaling support only works when the tree has the nutritional foundation to actually grow once that energy is freed up. Trees receiving both appropriate NPK fertilization and supplemental aspirin treatments during stress periods showed better stress recovery, stronger disease resistance, and more consistent fruiting than trees receiving fertilizer alone. The two inputs work together. Neither substitutes for the other. Now let's cover the buying mistakes that eat the most money, because this is where most of the real cost happens. not in one bad product, but in a pattern of purchases that were never going to work. The first mistake is buying based on the growth claim on the bag rather than the mechanism inside it. Every fertilizer label sells the outcome. Very few of them tell you what conditions the product was designed for or what growth stage it targets. A fertilizer that works well during vegetative growth may produce almost nothing during fruit set if the nutrient ratios are wrong for that phase. Excessive nitrogen during the bloom window pushes new leaf growth instead of flowers. That doesn't mean the product failed. It means it was the right product at the wrong time. The second mistake is buying slow release as a default without knowing the release window. Slow release formulas that break down over 90 to 180 days are cost efficient across a full season for in-ground trees that need sustained nutrition. They are not appropriate for trees in active short-term stress recovery, for trees in containers with limited soil volume, or for any situation where you need nutrients available in a shorter window than the product delivers. The cost per feeding may look better on the bag, but if the release timing doesn't match what the tree needs, the efficiency calculation breaks down. The third mistake is over-applying nitrogen late in the season. Excessive nitrogen later in the growing cycle delays flowering, reduces fruit quality, and increases susceptibility to internal fruit breakdown. This is documented across mango production research. The tree pushes vegetative growth when its energy should be going toward fruit development. The input cost was real. The yield consequence was real. And the reason it happened was that the grower kept doing what produced results earlier in the season without adjusting for where the tree was in its annual cycle. The fourth mistake is treating this aspirin method as a replacement for basic care. Growers who hear about it and start applying it to trees that are genuinely malnourished, chronically underwatered, or planted in soil that can't support root development will see nothing. Or they'll see the tree get worse. The stress signal support only matters when the tree has the foundation to respond to it. A tree that can't access water or nutrients because of poor soil structure isn't stalling because of stress signaling. It's stalling because the conditions aren't there for growth. No amount of salicylic acid fixes compacted clay or chronic drought. The fifth mistake is concluding that the method doesn't work after one application. Salicylic acid doesn't produce overnight results. Mango trees respond over weeks, not days. Growth patterns shift gradually. A flush that comes in stronger than the last one, leaves that hold their color better through a hot stretch, branches extending slightly further into the season than they did the year before. Growers who apply it once, see nothing dramatic in 4 days, and stop, never gave the tree enough time to show them anything. A few questions come up consistently when growers start working with this approach, so let me address the most common ones. What if your tree already looks healthy and you just want more fruit production? Salicylic acid treatments during active growing season have shown improvements in fruit productivity and fruit quality in research trials, not just in stressed or struggling trees. A tree that's already performing well can still benefit from better stress management during high-demand periods like heavy fruit set, as long as you're not overusing the treatment. Keep the dilution light. Keep the frequency appropriate. The improvement in a healthy tree will be more modest than in one that was genuinely stuck. What if you're growing in difficult soil conditions? Saline soil, heavy clay, high heat. Research specifically on mango trees grown in saline calcareous soil under heat stress found that salicylic acid treatments at appropriate concentrations produced measurable improvements in chlorophyll content, fruit productivity, and fruit quality. The recommendation from that research was to combine biochar amendment with low-concentration salicylic acid application. The aspirin method alone is not a soil remediation tool, but as part of a program that also addresses the soil conditions, it appears to contribute meaningfully even in difficult growing environments. How do you know if it's working? Watch for new leaf growth that comes in with stronger color and thicker texture than the previous flush. Watch for branches that extend further in a given season than they did the season before. Keep a written log. When you applied, what concentration, what you observed 2 weeks later and 4 weeks later. Memory compresses time. The log shows you what actually happened. The growers who figured this out before it had a name were not guessing. They were watching what happened when they changed one thing and left everything else the same. That is how practical growing knowledge accumulates. Not from a single dramatic result, but from enough seasons of careful observation that you stop getting surprised by what works and start understanding why. What you spend on inputs matters less than understanding what each input actually does. A $4 bottle of aspirin addressing the right problem at the right time will outperform a $30 bag of fertilizer applied to the wrong problem every season. The market gardener I mentioned at the start runs a tighter program now than he did 20 years ago, not because he found cheaper products, but because he stopped buying solutions to problems his trees didn't have. If this video was useful to you, leave a comment and let me know what mango fertilizer questions you're still sitting with. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We cover practical inputs like this every week, the kind of information that changes what you buy the next time you walk into a garden supply store.